Hey guys, Abdullah here, and this is a special episode of Yesterday's Capers. I've got a real treat for you guys just before Christmas, and it's an interview with singer Stephanie de Sykes. Stephanie de Sykes was one of the singers on the Bertha soundtrack. If you remember, back in the summertime, we did an episode talking all about this brilliant cartoon, and Stephanie de Sykes was a big part of that with her lovely singing. And yeah, it's one of those where I wanted to talk to her for the longest time, and thankfully we managed to chop it up and talk all about Bertha, talking all about music and everything in between. She's a great singer. This was a wonderful conversation, and sit back, relax, and enjoy. Thank you so much for talking to me and agreeing to do this. I just wanted to tell you as well, because like when me and my brother-in-law did the podcast, it was one of those things where we loved the theme tune, and it was like, oh my god, we just hope the TV show like kind of backs it up in terms of the theme song, and it definitely did. And like the music throughout in Bertha was just so wholesome, so incredible, and you have got one hell of a voice, man. You
Stop
really
it. No,
do.
not
really...
anymore. I don't. I can't sing anymore. I got the dreaded nodules many years ago. So I haven't sung for many years, but I enjoyed doing what I did back then. So I'm very grateful for that opportunity. Yeah, happy days. They were really happy days.
I can imagine. I mean, I think we should take it back. So if you could tell me like what growing up was like, and if you were watching any like cartoons or TV shows, and what were your favorites?
Blimey. Well, I'm so old that when I was growing up, we didn't have a television. I initially lived in a tiny village in Essex, and all the children gathered together to walk to the end of the village to see the first television aerial that went up, because somebody obviously had got a television installed. It was that exciting. Although my grandparents had a television, and funnily enough, my earliest memory of television happens to be of a Tom and Jerry cartoon, which I remember I saw on my grandparents' little TV set back. That'll be very early 50s, I guess, maybe 50, 51, something like that.
Nice. And I'm guessing you were a big fan of Tom and Jerry then?
Well, obviously I was a tiny child, and I thought it was the most wonderful thing I'd ever seen. I probably hadn't ever been to the pictures at that stage either. So, I mean, it would have looked like pure magic to me.
And because I think with Tom and Jerry as well, it's really good because you can kind of like watch it with different sort of generations. So like I know, like I love Tom and Jerry, like my mom liked it, like my grandma when she was alive, she loved Tom and Jerry. It's one of those where you can kind of watch it with all the generations and things like that. So
it's totally timeless.
Absolutely.
Mind you, that my son was obsessed from a very early age with Disney, and he still is. So I think, yeah, exactly. A lot of these things just don't change at all. They just stick with you.
So you probably like could like remember like when some of the early Disney stuff came out then. So like I think Cinderella came out in the 50s, and Sleeping Beauty, I think, as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. What would I have seen? To tell you the truth, Abs, we had no money, my family. We were very poor. So going to the cinema was not a thing. My son asked me the other day, what because I said, we got a takeaway, had a takeaway delivered. And he said, what did you have delivered in those days? And I said, there weren't deliveries. And in fact, we never ate out. In fact, once a year for a treat, we'd have fish and chips, so things were very different then. I'm sorry to sound like a little old lady, but
no,
it's the truth.
Don't be daft. I can relate to that in terms of like having a takeaway like once in a blue moon, and it's being like the biggest treat in the world because it's like away from the norm. And I think you mentioned Essex. So whereabouts in Essex did you grow up?
In the end, I grew up in a new town called Harlow.
Oh, okay. So I know Harlow, yeah.
Do you? Yeah. So that was where I moved there. I think I had my 7th birthday there. So that's where I spent the rest of my life into adulthood until I moved away. As a grown-up, and we were very lucky there because we had a cinema, eventually we had a theatre, because it was a very modern town. So it was a huge improvement. It was lovely.
And in terms of music, how did you get started with all of that?
Well, it was always around because my mother's father had been a silent movie pianist. So he could have told you some stories, couldn't he? Because his job was just to turn up at the cinema and a film would be put on. He wouldn't know anything about it and he'd just have to play. And he'd play right the way through according to, what the mood of the scene was. And if anybody ever asked him to play any of it again, he'd say, well, I don't know what I did, and my mother played and wrote songs as well. So music was always there and I always did it. I learned piano. And I never thought of being a singer at all. In fact, my passion was drama. I belonged to the local Amdram Society and drama was my thing. And that was what I wanted to pursue. And it was funny listening to the Bertha song, well, a couple of the Bertha songs. They had a bit of talking at the front and I thought, that was me calling on my old acting experience. that helped. And then the music, the singing happened by accident, really. It's, one of those things where you take something for granted. It's just something you can do and it never occurs to you to actually do it professionally. But it happened.
And, I wanted to ask you this, because I remember interviewing someone who was a musician, but I never really got the chance to ask him this particular question. So, like, in terms of how you kind of see the music industry today, because obviously you've got like the advent of things like X Factor and talent shows and things like that, and obviously you got social media as well to kind of build up a following and interest. So in terms of how you were first coming up as a singer compared to like someone now, how do you kind of compare? And also, would you prefer the way you did it, or would you kind of want the whole like coming in through like social media and television and kind of having that sort of quick 5-minute buzz and then kind of coming out again? Or
it's a good question. It's a really interesting one. So first of all, we did have talent shows. Okay. And in fact, my stumbling across from acting to singing happened because of a talent show. Okay. A television talent show, because I had a theatrical agent who I used to help out sometimes when his secretary couldn't, she was on holiday or something, and I studied shorthand and typing. And so I used to do a secretarial work. And one Friday, he said, what are you doing this weekend? And I said, I sing with the local dance band to make a bit of extra money. And he said, I didn't know you could sing, which is not very good for a theatrical agent. So he said, Huey Green's a friend of mine. I'll get him to audition you for Opportunity Knocks. And that was big in those days. Opportunity Knocks was the big talent show. And so I got called in for an audition. I got in, I got to perform on Opportunity Knocks. I didn't win, but one person from Pi Records wrote to me. And in those days, letters had stamps on the envelopes, and he wrote and said, look, I don't know if I can be of any help to you. I'm not very old and I'm not very big in Pi Records, but I could introduce you to a few people because I thought you were good. And indeed, he did. And God bless him, I'm eternally grateful to him. And somebody said to me, somebody that I was introduced to said, can you read music? And I could, because I'd learned piano. And he said, would you like to do a session? And I said, I'd love to do a session. And that was the beginning of it. So really, I can't complain about how things were. And in truth, I think the fact that I was able to cut my teeth fairly anonymously, make my mistakes, weeks without them being plastered all over the media. And, you know, I think that was a good thing. I feel very sorry for these kids who get up there and maybe make a mistake, maybe not at the audition stage, maybe actually get through, maybe even win. And then it's like they get attacked. I don't like that. I was very lucky. I was able to do it very quietly and learn my trade gradually. So I've got no complaints at all.
Yeah, because I think like with X Factor in particular, like it's kind of like you're thrusted into this limelight and you might not even be ready for all of that. And then
exactly.
you get given so much because you're on TV every Saturday. And then once it's all over, you're kind of left to kind of fend for yourself, and you haven't been given any experience or like mentoring or coaching or kind of ease you in and slowly and surely. So I think the way you've kind of described it, that sounds amazing.
I was very fortunate. They were great days, and my singer friends with whom I did sessions all the time, and I talk about this often. We just say how lucky we were back then. There were so many opportunities, and of course that's even not taking into account COVID, you know, which has put the kibosh on the few opportunities to expand their abilities and their repertoires that they already had. It's heartbreaking to see, and no live gigs. You know, we could do live gigs. You know. It's all changed. I hope it changes back to a degree for them, because we were very lucky.
Absolutely. And in terms of music, like who would you say like your favorite artists?
Oh Lord, well, I seem to have a thing. Always seem to have preferred mostly listening to female singers. So I love Janice Ian. I love Kiki D, Dionne Warwick. That sort of thing. I like proper singers, you know. And I sit there listening to them thinking, God, I wish I could have sung like that, you know, because they're just so damn good, really good. I mean, I do like some male singers as well, but I find myself sounding like my parents used to sound. I don't get modern music at all. I just occasionally something will grab me, but very rarely.
Do you know what? I feel
but that's how it's
exactly the
supposed
same.
to be, Ab. No,
I feel exactly.
really?
No, I really do. I really do. Like in terms of like modern, like top 40 music, if you like showed me the list, I could probably pick out maybe with one hand the songs on that list. I couldn't even tell you.
Oh, you're making me feel a lot better now.
I'm telling the truth. Like I look at it and it's like I don't. It's like I do feel like they don't make them like how I remember growing up, and even like with my kind of sort of music that I like older artists as well. So like I do like the Beatles, I like Simon and Garfunkel,
yes.
I like Billy Joel, it's stuff like the classic stuff. Like you just don't make them like that. And obviously I'm quite a big hip-hop fan, and like in terms of like rap music when I was growing up compared to now, it's not the same. I feel exactly. I'm looking at it, the charts now, and I'm like, I don't like this. I don't know him. I don't care about him. Stop it. Just turn it off, kind of thing.
But you know what the truth is? The truth is you're not supposed to like it. Just as my parents weren't supposed to like the music that I liked. We as we grow up, we want to have things that are ours. And I used to get really cheesed off if there was a great record out, and I'd say to my mum, "Listen, this is great, isn't it?" And she'd say, "Oh yeah, well that song was written in the 40s. That was a big hit when I was a girl, sung by so and so." And I used to get really cheesed off by that because I wanted things to be mine. I didn't want to share. I didn't want her to be able to claim any credit. You understand? So I think it's the way it's meant to be.
That is a brilliant way of looking at it, and I totally get the logic of that. I really do.
Yeah, and I don't know how old you are, but I know my son is 32, and he already says that he doesn't. Well, really? And
I'm
you're already
32.
losing a grip on it. Okay, right. Well, they'll just shrug your shoulders and let it be. Somebody once said.
Right. So let's talk about Bertha now, and talk about the beginning, like how you initially got involved with Bertha.
It was Guy Fletcher was a great, wonderful songwriter, very successful. He had a writing partner called Doug Flett, and I certainly recorded one of their songs, if not more. And we knew each other. We used to bump into each other at various functions. And he phoned me up one day and said, "Would you come along I've got a studio at my house." I'm trying to remember if it was Buckinghamshire or Hertfordshire. It was somewhere. It was very beautiful out in the country. And I turned up there, and Brian Daly was there, God rest his soul. And I knew that he'd done Postman Pat because my friend Ken Barry had been the voice of Postman Pat in the songs. And we just had a lovely time that day. I just remember it was a lovely, jolly day. There were no hassles, and I enjoyed having to do a little bit of, talking stuff, as I said, going back to my acting roots, and putting on a slight, very, very hint of a northern accent. It was nice to be able to just play with it and develop this little character.
Yeah. And so in terms of like Bertha, what would you say was your favorite part of being involved with Bertha, and what was the kind of the best thing about that show?
I think the best thing was realizing that my little boys were fans of Bertha, and them getting excited and being able to say to them, much as my mother had said to me, "Oh yes, I know that song from the 40s," I was able to say, "Oh, I sang that."
That's brilliant. But I think because when we kind of covered it for my podcast, Yesterday's Capers, it was one of those where me and my brother-in-law Paul, like, we had heard of Bertha, we had like heard of the show, but like we didn't have really like a lot of memories of it, like growing up in terms of when it came on TV. And then it was kind of like watching it again with fresh eyes almost when we started watching it and covering it. And it was one of those where it was so good. And I think there was like 11 or 12 episodes. And we were just like, why didn't they make more? I would have loved for it to have been more episodes.
I'm trying to imagine proper grown-ups aged around 30 binge watching Bertha.
It's the job, bizarre, isn't it? So yeah, and it was one of those where because like we have done like shows that we have hated and thought, oh my god, why am I watching this? This is such a chore.
Yes,
but not with Bertha, because it was one of those where it was done, I think, in 1985, but still, it was one of those where it was timeless in the sense that it was very well done. We like my brother-in-law, he's obsessed with stop motion. He absolutely loves it, like loves the way it's done. I mean, we understood that. I'm sure like each episode takes forever to make in terms of putting it together and the way it was back in 1985. But it was one of those where it was so well done. We were like, you know what? We would love to work in Spottiswoode factory. We'd love to work there. You know, I would love to have a Mrs. Tupp in my life. We just bringing the teas and the cakes. And
there's a machine now. The factories have machines. I don't think they have tea ladies with trolleys anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those where it was so well done. And I think when you put it up with its kind of like sort of peers and like contemporaries and like shows that similar, so like Postman Pat, Fireman Sam, Joshua Jones, all those kind of shows that we've all talked about, like when we say it with Bertha, like I want it to be in league with those programs, because I in my heart of hearts, I believe it was as good as those shows, and I believe it should have had a lot longer run than it kind of got.
Yes, I'd love to know the background to that. And unfortunately, Brian Daly's no longer around, so he couldn't tell you. But no, I just find it interesting that two young men would be interested in stop motion when you've been brought up on CGI. You'd think that you'd find it really primitive and irritating.
No, I mean, we've kind of agreed, because I think when we did the Postman Pat in particular, when you saw the stop motion Postman Pat versus the newer modern CGI, it was like night and day, in the sense that the old version was a million times better than anything you could do with CGI. CGI is so off-putting. There's a realness and an authenticity about stop motion that you can get 1,000 computers, 1,000 graphics. You can never replicate the authenticity of stop motion. And because obviously I grew up with watching stop motion programming, so I've kind of grown up with it, and I've kind of taken that along with me. And it's one of those where if I see on YouTube or something, oh, Postman Pat, or even like Noddy Adventures in Toyland, I'm watching it in CGI and in HD, and it's one of those things where it's too well done, if that makes any sense. It's too.
No, I do understand that. Too clinical.
Yeah.
Too clinical. Yeah. So you've just become a sentimental old fool before your time.
I think I have. I think I'm already there. It's like I don't care if I can see the strings on Noddy, or even like Rory on Bertha. I don't care if I see it. It's real to me.
Well, funnily, there you are. You see, because I've just remembered something else that I saw in the very early days of television, and it would be Muffin the Mule, which was all strings. It was all string. You could see the strings, and Andy Pandy and the Flower Pot Men, and you could see the strings, and we children, we didn't care. We really didn't care at all.
because what the thing was, it's telling a story, so I can sit down and I can watch it, and I can see what's happening. And I think one thing that producer Paul had said about Bertha, which I thought made sense, was that he goes that he kind of felt like it was almost a grown-up cartoon, because it's set in a factory, it's set in a working environment. You've got
the characters are grown-ups.
The characters are grown-ups. Everybody's got a job to do to kind of maintain and keep the factory going, whether it's the people downstairs who are kind of manning the machines, whether it's the people upstairs, so the people in charge and things like that. So it was very like, you can see like, right, we've got work to do, and we're doing this, that, and whatnot.
But they always had their cup of tea and their bun to look forward to.
Yes, definitely. So what would you say is your favorite character from Bertha? What character did you like the most?
Obviously Mrs. Tupp.
Yes.
Of course I did. Also, I could identify with her. And in my secretarial days, I'd worked in factories. I'd worked in the offices, but I'd been familiar with the factories, so it felt very familiar to me, very comfortable. And I'd look forward to the tea trolleys back in the day as well.
Definitely. You know what? I just had like this thing in my head where all it's just saying is, oh, the tea break, lovely tea break. I just got that in my head now for some reason. Just got that in my head.
Because you did. You'd get into work, and that would be your next sort of, in your head, that would be the thing that you were aiming for. So if I get this done and this done and this done, by then it should be 10:30 or 11 o'clock or whatever, and then the tea trolley should come round.
Yes.
And you'd smell it in the distance, because there'd be coffee on the tea trolley as well, and you would smell it, and the smell would get stronger the closer the tea trolley got to where you were sitting. Very exciting.
Definitely. I haven't thought
about that for years.
And what would you say is your favorite song from the album, and your favorite song that you loved recording, that you had so much fun doing?
I don't know why I enjoyed singing the Mrs. Tupp. She makes a cup of lovely fresh brewed tea. I don't know why, but that's the one I always remembered, because when you're doing the sort of work that I was doing then, which is, sometimes you were doing 3 sessions a day and you could be working 5 or 6 days a week, your brain develops a system whereby you walk out of the studio and it's gone. It has to be, otherwise you'd go insane, because you're going to have to sing another tune or 2 or 3 or 4 when you arrive at your next destination. But that one always stayed with me, which is a good sign, isn't it? But that was the one I always remembered.
Absolutely. I mean, I personally really like that song as well. Like, I remember watching the particular episode where I think someone had to have a bandage wrapped around their arm, and then Mrs. Tupp comes in with the tape and whatnot, and even with the trolley, and you can hear the song and like playing it for the first time. And I literally remember messaging my brother-in-law going, "You have to watch this episode. You have to listen to this song." And we were like, "Oh my!" It's like, it's so wholesome. It's so nice and lovely. Like, it's just one of
totally
those
harmless.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, I think Tracy's Robot Song.
Yeah, it's good.
Such a catchy little song.
It is. It's a bit scary, actually, when you think about where we are with AI and robots and things. Art reflecting the way life has become.
But no, again, it was one of those other ones where, like, when we've done, like, doing all these various shows that we've done, I think one of the things that me and my brother-in-law had kind of unanimously agreed on was that we never really liked shows that had like musical interludes for no reason. So, like, for example, I think we were watching Barney, the dinosaur, and literally every 2 seconds there would be someone going, "Right, I'm going to go outside," and then they sing a song about going outside. And then they're going back inside. They're going to sing a song about going back inside. And it's like, it's just so... But then with Bertha, the music complemented the TV show so well. It was like hand in hand. It kind of went with it, and it wasn't like an irritation when there'll be a musical interlude. It's like you're looking forward to it. Oh, what's going on here? They're going to build a talk operating machine called Tom. So, and then Tracy's, doing a whole talking. Oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to call him Tom. Yes. Tom.
God, you know more. You know that song better than I do.
I may or may not have had it on repeat for like 100 times since we did the episode on Bertha. But you know what? Like, isn't it nice? That is an incredible song as well. Because now that it's on YouTube, and you'd mentioned it before, I was kind of like curious and intrigued by that song. But it's such a nice, lovely song about, the people in the office bonding, playing cricket. And it's just such a lovely, genuine song that I thought, this is a good album, good show, kind of going hand in hand together.
Yeah, and it's a good way to influence kids as well, talking about, getting along with people, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And even like some of the stuff that Roy the Apprentice, Guy had sang. So like Roy the Apprentice, I really like that song. Roy was probably one of, my favorite characters on Bertha as well. He's got the ambitions to kind of, starting from the factory. So he wants to kind of work his way up to be where the boss is. So I kind of like that whole thing as well. So
yeah, teach the kids a bit of ambition.
Yes, definitely. And we were saying that, like, if I was in that world, I would love to work in, like I said it to you before, like, I would love to work in that factory. It was, and I think as well, I don't know if you agree with this. So like my brother-in-law, producer Paul, he was saying that like how Top Gun. So the film Top Gun with Tom Cruise and whatnot. I think there was like a massive sort of like recruitment drive to kind of join the IRF or the army. He was saying that maybe Bertha might be like a really good sort of recruiting tool to kind of get people to work in factories. And I was like, if that's the case, then I'll sign me up. I'd love to work in a place like that where you're kind of talking to people. You've got like Nell and Flo who are doing the packing and the stacking. You've got Roy, who's the apprentice. You've got Tracy upstairs, and you've got the boss and everything. That the way that the whole thing was set up, I thought, yes, sign me up, man.
You're funny. Would you have time to do podcasts then if you were working in a factory? Maybe not.
I don't know. Maybe in the tea break, I might be
Yes.
able to sneak
Lovely
a couple of
tea break.
lines in. Yes, yes, absolutely. And finally, I wanted to say, I think you kind of maybe already answered this. So, like, do you or did you watch lots of cartoons and TV shows with other family members, or even like you were talking about your son? Did you?
Yeah, I used to watch some with my sons, but the only other thing is, of course, because I was working, you know, I had a career. I mean, very often I would be grateful for programs like that. If I was at home, I'd be grateful for them to keep the children occupied while I rushed around and prepared a meal so that it was ready by the time I got back from work, that sort of thing. So probably didn't watch as much of it as I could have done, is the truth. Very often you would discover, it's quite bizarre really, my children would say, they'd be, I mean, I'm going back to the days of album sleeves and records, but they'd say, "Oh, Mummy, you sang on," I've forgotten, there was one, was it Bugsy Malone? I don't know, it was a film that did really well. And he said, one of my sons said, "You sang on this film, Bugsy Malone," or whatever it was. And I said, "No, I didn't." "Well, I did, you know, but I'd forgotten." But it was confusing because it was a track that we'd recorded with a band, and then it had been seconded later to this movie, whatever the movie was. So one didn't know the link anyway. But there are frequent times when people write to me on Facebook and say, "I really loved the way you sang on such and such," and I've often written back and said, "Look, I'm really sorry, but I didn't sing on that." And then they'll send me a link and I'll listen to it and I'll think, "Oh, blimey, they're right, I did." It's a combination of having been very busy when young and now getting very ditzy when old.
I mean, it's one of those things where I think you have quite a distinct voice, where I can kind of sort of listen to it and think, "Oh my God, that is definitely you singing. That's definitely your voice." And I know you were talking about saying that you wish you could sing as good as those other singers.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, it's one of those where you in your own right, you are a very good singer, and I'm sure if it was one of those where if you got back into it, even like as a small kind of thing, not like, you know, big gigs or whatever, if it was one of those where you're learning how to ride a bike sort of thing, I'm sure you could belt out a couple of these songs of yours. I'm sure you could.
Well, I think it's only fair to leave it to the young ones. You know, we had our opportunity, and I think it's only fair to leave it to the youngsters to carry on. It was great. I was so fortunate, and I would hate to be greedy.
That's absolutely fair enough. And lastly, I just want to ask you, so like, you know, obviously 2020 has just been the absolute worst year for everybody involved, and I just wanted to say, like, how are you doing, and how are you kind of holding up, and how, you know, looking forward to Christmas and what that might potentially look like?
I'm doing just fine. I've reached a stage in my life where I'm quite hermit-like anyway. I like to hunker down at home. I potter about pursuing my interests, most of which are fairly home-based anyway. But I get very distressed on behalf of other people who aren't so fortunate. I was just saying to my son, just before you and I spoke, I said, you know, we're so lucky that we're not having to go out and work in a hospital or in a shop, or, you know, people are having to carry on out there. And then there are other people doing the job that I used to do who would like nothing more than to be able to go out and do their job, but they can't, you know. So I'm afraid I'm very fortunate, and my heart breaks for people who are struggling with this. Touch wood, my chances of catching it are pretty slim because I don't go out very much. Some people have no choice. And I can't see an end to it. Can you?
I mean, unless you just got to hope these vaccines kind of work out, really. And then obviously, get it out to the people who definitely need it the most. Because
I just hope it doesn't make people get too sort of relaxed about social distancing and being sensible around it.
But no, Stephanie, thank you so much for talking to me. I think
it's been a pleasure.
One of my kind of reasons for doing a podcast, I kind of sort of came up with this idea, was that I wanted to give like shows and actors and singers and people who are part of the show, I want to give them their flowers, because I don't think that there's a lot of podcasts or even like stuff out there that would look back on certain TV shows and certain cartoons and think, you know what, they deserve their flowers. So this is me kind of saying, you know what, Stephanie, you got a brilliant voice. You kind of made Bertha for me when you're singing about Mrs. Tupp or Tracy or Isn't It Nice? And I think you definitely deserve your flowers for that.
Oh, thank you for the flowers, for the virtual flowers. I do appreciate it.
Yes, I'm handing it to you virtually. So,
thank you. They smell lovely.
But no, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. And I know it's 2 weeks till Christmas, so I can say, have a wonderful Christmas and New Year. And
you too. You take it easy and stay very safe, please.
Yes, you too, Stephanie.
All right, my dear.
All right, take care.
And you. Thanks again.
All
Bye-bye.
Right. Bye. So there you have it, Stephanie de Sykes. And yeah, like I said, I'm really happy that I can give her flowers. I think that's what I want Yesterday's Capers to be, really, to give actors and actresses and TV shows their flowers, because who else is gonna do it? I'm looking around, nobody's doing it. Ain't nobody giving Bertha its flowers and Stephanie de Sykes and Guy Fletcher their flowers. The same with Tom Lowe and North and South. When I spoke with him, I just want to give people their flowers, and I definitely want to do more of that in the coming months and beyond the new year and things like that. That is my my big grand plan, and hopefully I can see to it and get that done. And like I said, that's a great interview with Stephanie. She was wonderful to talk to. And yeah, I mean, if you go and on YouTube, the entire Bertha soundtrack is on there, so I would definitely recommend you go and listen to it. The songs are great, the songs are wholesome, it's for the whole family. And yeah, just give it a listen, and give this a listen, and also Yesterday's Capers, because we're available wherever you get your podcast from. Give us a like, give us a share, subscribe, comment, let me know what you want to see and all of those things. And you can follow me on the socials. On Instagram, it's Abdullah_Moallim. On Twitter, it's Abdullah Moallim, all one word. Give me a holler, give me a shout, and yeah, join us next time for Yesterday's Capers.
Eat and drink and have some fun, ready for the